What does it mean to practice Anglo-Saxon heathenship in the modern world? And if you're looking to get started on that path, where do you begin? That's the topic we're going to be looking at in today's video. So, although Anglo-Saxon heathenship is often overshadowed by its more popular counterpart of Norse paganism, it is still a very deep and very unique tradition to get involved with, especially if you know where you are looking. The intention of this video is for me to provide you with a starting point for your own research into Anglo-Saxon heathenship. I'll provide you with an overview, but there is only so far you can get by listening to people like me on YouTube. So I thoroughly encourage you to watch this video, but then go out and to read the sources for yourself and come to your own conclusions. And to make that a little bit easier, I'm going to leave a bibliography down in the description below. I also want to make it clear that these are my own personal views. I'm not a spokesperson for any temple, hof, or spiritual organisation. I've considered myself a heathen for 11 years now, I believe. And over time, my beliefs have changed as I have matured and changed myself. So what I'm about to present to you is my own personal practice. Anglo-Saxon heathenship is the modern reconstruction of the pagan beliefs of pre-Christian England. Between the 4th and the 7th centuries, the Germanic tribes of the Angles, Jutes and Saxons migrated to Britain, bringing with them their local customs, traditions, and gods, which then blended with local tradition. Over time, these religious practices became the foundation of pre-Christian England. Now, unlike Norse mythology, which has rich written sources from the later poetic and prose Eddas, Anglo-Saxon heathenship is pieced together from a variety of different sources. There is Bede's ecclesiastical history of the English people, which gives a more Christian perspective on pagan practices. There's the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, whose records mention some pagan rites. A lot of Old English poetry, so Beowulf, the Rune poem, Nine Herbs charm. Lots of archaeological findings from grave goods, burial sites and temple remains. There's later English folklore, elements of which can possibly preserve some earlier pagan practices. There is also an element of comparative reconstructionism, by looking at texts and archaeology from the continent and extrapolating from later Norse sources. That is to say, there is a lot of material that we can draw on when we are trying to reconstruct Anglo-Saxon heathenship. However, it's also important to note that the original heathen era was a long time ago. The passage of time and the Christian church has had a devastating effect on the materials that remain to this day. There is very, very little chance that we can ever develop a fully comprehensive view of what an Anglo-Saxon heathen practicing heathenship in the Anglo-Saxon period would have looked like. However, I don't think this is a massive issue. We are not looking to reconstruct Anglo-Saxon society. In this day and age, it simply wouldn't make sense. For many, the search for an authentic history, a practice rooted in the beliefs of our ancestors, can feel pretty overwhelming. With no intact scripture, with no singular orthodoxy, drawing only from fragmented sources, how can we ever know that we are doing it truly right? But here's the truth. Heathenry, as it once was never a static religion. Some modern heathens believe that the only way to practice this faith is through strict historical reconstructions, practicing things exactly as they would have been done over 1,000 years ago. Others fall into another trap, projecting your modern ideas onto the past and filling in the gaps with contemporary spirituality. Both approaches have their pitfalls. The reality is that Anglo-Saxon heathenship was constantly evolving. It was shaped by trade, it was shaped by war, it was shaped by migration. It is and always has been a living, breathing tradition. The rites and customs of one kingdom may not have been the same as the rites and customs of another kingdom. And even if Anglo-Saxon paganism had remained alive, it would not be the same now as it was back in the day. Time would have shifted it, time would have changed it. It would have grown and adapted, just as all living religions do. So instead of chasing this perfect, unbroken lineage, I believe that we should focus instead on something more practical. Making heathenry meaningful and useful today. Now, this doesn't mean that we should discard historical accuracy. Well-attested beliefs and rites should, of course, hold more weight than unverified speculation. But heathenry needs to be something that can be lived, not just studied in books or reenacted at festivals. If this faith is to thrive, it needs to be something that people can engage with without needing a degree in Old English or to own your own Iron Age farmstead. We are not here to resurrect a lost medieval society. We are here to walk the path of our ancestors in a way that makes sense for us as 21st century humans living in a modern world. And that means embracing what heathenry has always been, a flexible and evolving way of life. Too often, discussions of heathenry get caught between two extremes. It's either a rigid academic exercise or a dramatic, romanticised fantasy. But this path was never meant to be either. It is not a monolithic, dogmatic religion. There was never a pan-Germanic orthodoxy. It's not about performance, it's not about reenactment villages or museums, it's not about LARPing the Anglo-Saxon or the Viking period. What we seek then is a bridge, a way that we can honour and respect the past without becoming trapped by it. A way to root our belief in the known traditions of our ancestors whilst allowing room for growth, change, and a personal connection. The gods are still here, the land is still sacred. Our ancestors walked their path in their time, and now it is our turn to walk our own path in ours. What matters most is not whether our heathenry is a perfect replica of the past, but whether it is alive, personal, and rooted in truth. So now I want to talk a little bit about the Anglo-Saxon heathen worldview, and I'm going to start off with the sacredness of nature. To the heathens of old, the land was not just soil beneath their feet. The rivers were not just water, the wind was not just air, the forest was not just trees. All things were alive, animated with spirits that were woven into the very fabric of existence. This is the world where gods and spirits were not distant beings ruling from on high, but they were embodied within the very land itself. They were an ever-present force. Unlike later Christian traditions, which places humanity in dominion over nature, heathens saw themselves as part of it. They walked within a sacred landscape, one that was inhabited by the spirits of the land who watched over groves, mountains, trees, forests, rivers, and demanded both respect and reverence. And this belief, far from being a relic of the past, is something that remains just as meaningful today. Even today, echoes of these beliefs remain within English landscapes. The very names of places, Thundersley, meaning Thunder's Grove, Wandike, meaning Woden's Ditch, and many others tell of a landscape that was inhabited by the very gods. Heathens did not build great stone temples because their places of worship were the rivers, the groves, and the places where earth and sky met. To be heathen is to walk in a world where the divine is not separate from nature, but a part of it. This brings us to one of the fundamentals of heathen theology, animism, the belief that spirits both great and small dwell in all things. To the Anglo-Saxon heathen, the world was not an empty stage upon which humans acted. It was alive, conscious, and filled with spirits. The wind had a will, the stones held memory, and the forests spoke to each other in their own ancient tongues. This belief is known as animism, the idea that everything has a spirit of its own, everything is its own being, whether that be animals, trees, or seemingly inanimate rocks. From a heathen worldview, these spirits are not passive. They interact with the world, and they can be appeased, honoured, or even angered. It was believed that these spirits influenced the world around them. That is why offerings were made to the rivers, why sacred groves may remain untouched, and why someone might ask for permission before stepping into an ancient forest. The world was not merely a resource to be used, it was a living, breathing entity. It was filled with wights and unseen forces. Alongside animism, heathenry embraces the concept of immanence, the idea that the divine is not sort of some out-of-reach abstract thing, but is very present within the world itself. Many modern religions place the sacred outside of the material. Their gods live in distant heavens far removed from the physical world. But heathenry does not see the divine as separate from reality. Instead, the gods are woven into the world around us. They are in the storm, in the fire, in the harvest. They are not distant overseers, but active forces within existence itself. A deity may be the essence of a river. It might be the strength of a mountain. It might be the fire of inspiration that fills the mind of a poet. The gods are not bound to far-off realms, they are interconnected within the world itself. Animism and immanence are not separate ideas, they are two sides of the same coin. One, that the world is alive with spirit and presence, and two, that the divine is within all things. In this framework, the gods are not distant or powerful rulers, but spirits entwined with nature itself. A god is not a singular, omnipotent being. It is a force, a presence, something worthy of veneration. And so the gods of heathenry were never separate from the world because the world itself is sacred. Before Christianity reshaped the way we think about divinity, the word God did not mean a singular, all-powerful being. In this sense, then, the gods of heathenry are both forces of nature and intellectual concepts. Woden is not merely a deity of wisdom, he is wisdom itself, cunning, craftiness, insight given form. Thunor is not just the god of storms, he is the storm itself, the raw, untamed power of the heavens. This understanding aligns with the way that the Germanic tribes viewed their gods. They are not distant and unknowable, they are part of the world itself. And so as we move forward, let us think about what it means to truly honour these gods. They are not distant beings in a far-off realm, but they are beings, and they do exist in the land alongside us to this very day. To be heathen is to walk with an awareness of the living world, to see the spirits in the trees, to feel the gods in the storm, to understand that the divine is not found in the distant heavens, but in the land itself. The breath of the wind, the rush of the wither, the fire that burns within the hearth. The old ways are not about separation, they are about interconnectedness. And so as we seek to reconstruct heathenship for the modern day, let us not imagine that the gods are lost in some golden age of the past, but they are still here. They have always been here, and they still speak to those who listen. Who then are the gods of the heathen world? Who are the spirits that walk unseen, that shape weird, that are the guardians of home and hearth? At first glance, the pantheon of Anglo-Saxon heathenship may seem pretty straightforward. There's Woden, Thunor, Frigg, and a handful of others that we can pull from various different sources. But beneath the surface lies a complex and overlapping web of divine beings. Gods, spirits, ancestors, and forces beyond human comprehension. Unlike modern religious traditions, which often categorise divinity into strict boxes, heathenship doesn't quite have that. Instead, gods and spirits exist in a fluid and interconnected system. Anglo-Saxon heathenship recognises several categories of divine beings, each with unique roles but often existing with rather fluid relationships to other beings. There are the Aesi, the great gods of cosmic power, the Elfas, spirits of land and mystery, the Aitse, ancestral guardians often depicted as powerful female figures, and the Kofgordas, household spirits who protect hearth and home. Now these are not rigidly separate groups, but rather overlapping presences within this divine web. Now the Aesi, known as the Aesir in Norse mythology, are the ruling gods of the heathen cosmos. They embody sovereignty, wisdom, war, and fate. They are the great powers, forces that shape the world and command respect. Woden, the wanderer and god of knowledge, speaks in riddles and gathers wisdom from the hidden places of the world. Thunor, the hammer-wielding Stormbringer, is both protector and destroyer, his voice heard in the crash of thunder. Frigg, the wise and far-seeing, weaves the strands of destiny as queen of the gods. These are the mightiest forces known to the heathens, but they are not the only ones. Next are the Elfas, known today as the Elves, but to the heathens they were far more than just fairy folk. They are spirits of the land, of water, of trees. They are ascended ancestors, warriors who have passed into the unseen world, and beings of immense power whose influence touches both men and gods. Unlike the Aesi, whose might shapes the fate of kingdoms, the Elfas are found in the sacred spaces of this world. Where the river bends, where an ancient tree stands alone, where the land whispers with something unseen. It is likely that the Elfas serve the same role as the Vanir of Norse mythology, although the term Vanir is a later invention. Before the Viking Age, these spirits were known as divine beings, neither lesser nor greater than the gods, but existing alongside them, although in different spheres of influence. The Aitse, our ancestral mothers, are guardians of family and lineage. They are the matronae of earlier Germanic beliefs who watched over home and kin. To call upon the Aitse is to call upon the strength of those who came before, the mothers and grandmothers who shaped our lives long before we were born. Now, the term itself carries layered meaning. Sometimes it refers to divine beings, other times it refers to mortal women who had power in life and continued to have so in death. In some cases, they are nearly indistinguishable from the Elfas. They both occupy that liminal space between mortal and divine. Finally, the Kofgordas are the spirits of home and of the sacred hearths. Unlike the Aesi, who command the sky and the storm, the Kofgordas dwell in these small, intimate spaces of daily life. Places where food is prepared, where families gather, and where ancestors are remembered. These spirits are tied to objects and locations. They live in the family's hearthfire, in the threshold of a door, in the tools used in daily life. To neglect them is to invite misfortune, but to honour them is to seek out their blessings. And in doing so, you ensure frith and well-being for both you and your household. Now, attempting to categorise these beings is no easy task because the lines between them were never rigidly defined. Heathen belief, as we've said, was fluid. It shifted with both time and place. The same term might carry different meanings depending on the region that you're in, the storyteller who is telling the story, or the ritual that you're trying to perform. Take the word Valkyrja, for instance. It is related to the Old Norse Valkyrie, the chooser of the slain, yet its meaning is slightly ambiguous. Was the Valkyrja a goddess of death, or was she a spirit of battle? Was she something else entirely? Was she a weaver of the looms of fate? And what of weird itself? The term most often relates to the concept of fate, yet in some cases it is personified, much like the Norse Urtha. In the poem The Wanderer from the Exeter book, we hear the words Weird byth full arad. Fate is inexorable. But in that moment, weird does not merely describe an idea, it is acting. It is a force or entity, something which is acting upon the world in the same way as a god or a spirit might. The divine in heathenry is not a simple hierarchy of gods and lesser beings. It is a web, a vast and intricate structure which, to be honest, defies rigidity and defies specification. To the heathen mind, divinity is not tied to singular definitions. A sea could act as Elphas, Ita could become god, and even the forces of weird could take on a name and form when the moment called for it. Now I'm going to give a brief summary of the concepts of weird and Oleg. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I have made a previous video about this, which I will drop a link to in the description below. So in Anglo-Saxon Heathenship, weird represents the concept of destiny. It is an intricate web of fate, both inevitable and shaped by your own personal decisions and actions. It is similar to the Norse concept of Urtha, but whereas Urtha is specifically personified as someone who weaves the threads herself, weird is more conceptual. However, in some poetic passages, weird does appear to have some agency, meaning it's possible that in some places or circumstances it was viewed as having form, much like the Norse Urtha. The concept of weird governs the unfolding of existence. However, it does not stand in opposition to free will. Heathenship acknowledges the interplay between agency and determinism. Individuals have the power to make their own choices, but those choices take place within the greater structure of fate itself. In this way, personal actions shape the unfolding of one's own weird, even if some of the things that go on in your life are inevitable. Closely related to the concept of weird is Oleg. Now, Oleg is the accumulated layers of your past deeds. Think of it kind of as a metaphysical record of one's own actions. It shapes the future outcome of your life and your own individual trajectory. Much like the concept of karma in some Eastern traditions, Oleg represents the choices that you have made carried forward into the future. As an example of Oleg, imagine a young warrior named Adric. He is born into a lineage of famed, oath-sworn warriors. His ancestors served their lord faithfully, earning honour and renown through their deeds. This honour and renown accumulated over generations, creating a strong family Oleg. This means that Adric is born into a family of loyalty, high honour and high expectations. However, Oleg is not just about ancestry, it is about your personal actions. Suppose that, despite his family's honour, Adric betrays his lord in battle, forsaking an oath that was sworn upon his ancestor's blade. His betrayal is not just a singular act, it stains the fabric of his Oleg, and therefore disturbs the course of his weird. From that moment, Adric is branded an oathbreaker. His reputation is shattered. Future generations may suffer the consequences, as his name is now spoken with disdain rather than with respect. However, Oleg is not necessarily a fixed destiny. It can be repaired over time through honourable actions. If Adric seeks redemption, swearing new oaths and proving his loyalty through hardship and sacrifice, he may begin to redeem his family's name. His descendants will then inherit this repaired Oleg, shaped by both his disgrace and the honour that he earned in trying to repair it. Ultimately, heathenship teaches that fate is neither entirely rigid or entirely mutable. Weird is woven both through a thread of personal action, past choices, and cosmic forces. It is bound together in an interconnected whole. And for a deeper exploration of weird and heathenship belief, please check out my earlier video, which, as I said, is in the description somewhere below all this. Next thing we're going to talk about is ritual within the concept of heathenship. Rituals in Migration Age heathenry were far more than just a simple act of worship. They were the basis of a relationship between mortals and the divine. Rooted within the aforementioned animistic worldview, these rituals basically built upon the fact that the divine is part of the world and not separate from it. Rivers, trees, groves and stones all contain spirits, and ritual was the means that humans interacted with these spirits. Through offerings, invocations and communal rites, heathens acknowledged their interconnectedness with the natural world. They reinforced the sacred bond between mortals and the divine. Now, one of the most fundamental aspects of heathen ritual is reciprocity. This is the idea that relationships between humans and gods are based upon mutual exchange. Rather than submission or blind devotion, heathenship operated on a gift-giving economy, I suppose. You give to the gods, and in return, they give back to you. Heathens would have made offerings of food, drink, weapons, and other valuable items such as cattle or gold to the gods, to the spirits, and to the ancestors. Most of these offerings were not just sacrifices, but gestures of respect and gratitude. It reinforced this relationship of mutual obligation between mortals and the divine. The expectation was that then in return the gods would offer their blessings, their protection, and their favour. Another form of ritual came in the form of feasts and communal celebrations. Rituals were not isolated acts, but shared experiences. These would have taken the form of bluts, which were ritual sacrifices and offerings, and symbols, which were, again, ritualised toasts and oath-making. It's also a way to strengthen community ties because you are sharing food and drink not just with the gods, but with other members of your community as well. By making your boasts and taking oaths during the symbol, you are doing so in a community which will then hold you accountable to the things that you say. These communal rites reinforced thrift, which is a sacred peace, and kinship amongst your fellows. We did just speak a little bit on oaths, so that in itself is another form of ritual which I'm going to briefly dive into now. Oaths themselves are sacred bonds sworn in the presence of the gods. Most of the time this was done to establish agreements, show your loyalty, or to swear that you were going to do something, a personal commitment. To break an oath was not just a betrayal of honour, but a violation of this rule of reciprocity. To be known as an oath breaker was not a good time for anyone. It could invite divine displeasure down upon you, even ruin. People would not trust you if you were an oath breaker. Heathen society functioned upon trust and the expectation that all parties, even the gods, would honour their end of the bargain. Many rituals were also tied to the cycles of the year, the equinoxes and the solstices, as well as harvests and any other significant seasonal events. These rites were based around ensuring divine favour with the changing of the seasons, and it reinforced the idea that human survival was dependent upon this reciprocal relationship between the gods and the landwights. To the heathens of old, ritual was not separate from life, it was life itself. It ensured the continuity of relationships with the divine, stability within the community. Now, as this is a vast and intricate topic, I will be covering it in much more detail in future videos. Some of the areas I'll be exploring in the future are bluts, symbols, household rituals. I'll cover the sort of stuff that I do in my general day-to-day practice, and also how to structure your own and really make it unique to yourself and to your situation. Finally, we're going to talk a little bit about ancestor veneration within Anglo-Saxon heathenship. In heathenship, the dead do not simply vanish into nothingness. Their presence lingers woven within the fabric of our world. It influences the living in ways both seen and unseen. The ancestors are not gone, they walk with us, they watch over their descendants. They offer wisdom, they offer protection, and they offer strength. Now, ancestor veneration is a core principle of animistic belief. It is rooted in the understanding that spirits remain connected to this earthly realm after they depart from their bodies. The influence of the dead does not end with death. They continue to influence our world long after they are gone. They can protect, bless, and guide people who are descended from them. To those who follow a heathen route, honouring the ancestors is more than just a personal practice. It is a way of maintaining a living link to those who came before you. Now, by remembering them and giving offerings to them, we don't just remember them, we strengthen that link that runs back through the generations. You can already hear some people saying, isn't it funny how every neo-pagan's ancestors converted to Christianity at some point? That's fine. You can honour your Christian ancestors as well. I personally think it would be weird not to, considering that here in the UK we have been Christian for the past 1400 years or so. Of course, honour your Christian ancestors. They are still your ancestors, regardless if they don't have the same worldview as you. Ancestor veneration is not about the worship of the dead as divine beings, but acknowledging the role that they play in our lives. Heathenship teaches that the presence of the ancestors is always with us. They don't exist in some distant afterlife, but alongside us. They can manifest through dreams, omens, or feelings of unseen guidance. To honour them is to ensure that their legacy continues. Now again, tying into the ritual section that we just spoke about, offer something up to your ancestors. Seek out their wisdom, seek out their protection. Whether that's food, drink, other objects, spoken words of personal remembrance, it's the thought that counts. By giving gifts to the dead, we strengthen the bond between successive generations. It reinforces the unity of a family and a community. It connects individuals not just to their immediate family, but to the entire chain of ancestors who came before them. And it helps us to embrace the interconnectedness of past, present, and future. Even in the modern world, a lot of the old ways of honouring the dead persist. We go to their graves, we light candles, we speak fond words of remembrance for them. For heathens, it's not just about remembrance, it's about establishing that living bond with your ancestors. Because your ancestors have shaped you just as my ancestors shaped me. The choices that they made ripple throughout time. They influence our Oleg and our Weird. By honouring them, we acknowledge their sacrifice. By honouring them, we acknowledge their struggles. By honouring them, we acknowledge their wisdom and ensure that their presence is never lost. Again, I will go into more depth on this topic in a future video because it is pretty dense. Now I'm going to have a quick break and have a cup of tea. Back to it. So you've now got a basic overview about what a Anglo-Saxon heathen's worldview would have consisted of. As I said, I'm going to go into more detail on various topics in future videos because it is, as I said, an introduction, not a comprehensive guide. But you've got the basics. Now, why does this matter? Well, now it's time to talk about the problems and the challenges of Reconstructionism. Now, as we discussed earlier in this video, Anglo-Saxon heathenism remains relatively obscure compared to Norse heathenism. Now, this is largely due to Christianization, a lack of surviving early texts, and again, the overshadowing influence of Asatru in modern heathenism. By the time of King Alfred in the 9th century, Anglo-Saxon heathenism had almost been entirely erased from the written record. It left behind only fragments preserved in poetry, folklore, and archaeology. Since we lack a complete record of Anglo-Saxon heathen beliefs, modern practitioners rely on 4 main methods to reconstruct it. The first is scholarly reconstruction. That's mostly using historical texts such as Beowulf, the Rune poem, the Nine Herbs charm, and many others alongside archaeology to pull together the fragments of authentic practice. The second is the comparative method. This involves drawing on Norse and Germanic sources to fill in the gaps, although we do risk importing things that were not practiced in Anglo-Saxon England at the time. The third method is looking at folk traditions and what has survived in Christian texts. This is through tracing pre-Christian elements in English folklore, such as Yule and Wassailing, for example. The fourth is intuitive and spiritual reconstruction. Unverified personal gnosis and shared personal gnosis. This allows for personal experience and gnosis to guide modern practice. Now, it does allow for spiritual connection, although it does run the risk of deviating from its historical roots. Now we have opened up a can of worms. How pure should reconstruction be? Some people are strict reconstructionists. They prioritise the historical element whilst trying to ignore any modern influence. There are eclectic heathens, which incorporate a mix of historical, spiritual, and modern elements into their daily practice. Then there's also the difference between inclusive and folkish heathenry. Some groups will emphasise ancestry, while others will welcome all those who are drawn to this faith. For me, the key point is trying to find a nice balance between tradition and modernity. Got to honour the old ways whilst making them meaningful today. Since heathenship was never static, it makes sense for this to be a evolving personal religion. However, ultimately each practitioner will have to find their own balance and decide what is right for them. Do you care more about following a strictly scholarly and academic spirituality? Do you emphasise ancestry and ethnic identity, which in modern times is rather controversial, or do you adopt a more welcoming and opening ideology? And now for another can of worms. How do you practice heathenship in the modern world? Well, the simple answer is it's different for everyone. Unlike mainstream religions, Anglo-Saxon heathenship has no central dogma. It has no religious doctrine. It is a practice-based faith rooted in ritual, nature, and reciprocity. Now, whether you're new to the path or whether you're looking to deepen your practice, I'm going to go through some of the things that I do, at least, and how to integrate it into your daily life. One thing I've not touched on yet in this video is the concept of virtues. Now, Asatruism does have virtues in the form of the 9 noble virtues. I cannot remember who came up with them, but they're based upon texts. Similarly, Anglo-Saxon heathenship, I think, has a set of virtues that can be seen throughout the corpus of existing literature. Surprise, surprise, I will go into them further in another video, but here's a list to start with. Courage, decency, piety and devotion, fidelity, magnanimity, prudence and truthfulness. If we're going to use our ancient ancestors as an example on how to live our life, then we should at least try and adopt a code of ethics that reflects their worldview and is, for all intents and purposes, it's a good thing to have in life, I think. Secondly, honour the gods, the spirits, and the ancestors. At its core, heathenry is about building and maintaining relationships with the unseen world. This is done through rituals, offering, and perhaps daily acts of reverence if that appeals to you. The most important ritual is the blut, the offering ritual. Gifts are given to landwights, deities, and to the ancestors. This can be bread, meat, honey, handcrafted items, whatever. As long as you're offering something up that has personal value to you, that's fine. It can be performed at home. You can create your own altar, you can create your own sacred space, or you can do it outdoors. Very, very simple structure. You make an invocation, you give your offering, you make your petition to the gods, and then you offer thanks to them. I would say that attempting to commune with the spirits of the land and your ancestors is also another key part of practicing heathenship in the modern day. Leave offerings at trees, rivers, hills. Respect nature. Try to minimise your carbon footprint. Leave something out for the birds or the squirrels. Try to be more mindful in how you act around the natural world. Treat it with respect. Likewise, through ancestor veneration, you keep the connection between the living and the dead strong. Spend some time talking to your ancestors. Research your family history. Find out what it was that your people did. I recently discovered that my great-grandfather was an intelligent man who helped design weapons that helped the Allies win the Second World War. Set up an ancestor shrine in your home. Have photographs of them, like candles. Honour them. But heathenry isn't just confined to ritual. It is a way of life. Integrate small daily practices into your day-to-day life to keep your faith strong. One thing that I do is offer up a prayer to 4 gods every morning. By making it a part of your daily ritual, you are bringing them into your life. It maintains a divine connection. It maintains the relationship that you have with these gods. And if you make it a habit, psychologically, it means that you are, connecting with them. It reinforces it in your own mind. So observe nature's cycles. Heathenry is deeply tied to seasonal rhythms and to the land around you. Track seasonal changes. In the modern world, we spend a lot of time indoors. I've spent God knows how long at this computer making a video for you. But spend more time outside. Watch as the seasons change from winter to spring to summer to autumn. Honour sacred trees. Honour landscapes in your area. Go out, see what is around you. See what wildlife is around you. Learn the names of the trees, of the plants that are on your daily commute, or the place where you walk your dog, or where you go with your children or your family. Attain knowledge about the land. Learn its history. Learn your local history, for that matter. As I said, heathenry is not just about gods and rituals and daily practices. It is a way to live, and it is about how you live as well. Take responsibility for your own actions. Shape your weird. Accumulate positive oleg. Act with honour in your own personal life. Going back to the virtues that I mentioned earlier in this section. Keep frith. Maintain peace, loyalty and honour within your community. For that matter, get involved with your community. Is there charity work that you can be doing? Is there a homeless shelter that you can volunteer at? Is there a way that you can make a positive difference in the lives of the people that are around you? Not just your family, but in your local area as well. Much is said of Christians who go out and volunteer. They are good people. If we want heathenship to become more recognised, for people to know that we are here, then we need to put ourselves out there. We need to also be good people in a very, very visible way. Not for the sake of being visible, but just so that people know about us. And more importantly, because it is the right thing to do. So often in the modern world, we are isolated. We are closed off. We spend all of our time in our own houses or with our immediate family. To my mind, at least, there is a very serious lack of community spirit, even here in England. It's the world that our grandparents lived in doesn't exist anymore. But we can help create it again or make it even better. On that note, give gifts. Go out and strengthen your relationships with reciprocal gift giving. Celebrate heathen festivals. It's an excuse to have a good time, and there are a lot of them. I will, of course, post a link below in the description. Going back to that community point, find community with other modern heathens, whether that is in an area local to you or whether you join an online community. Heathenry was tribal and it was communal. While many heathen practitioners walk a solitary path, I would argue that you shouldn't, despite the fact that for the last 11 years I have pretty much done so myself. But now I'm beginning to reach out to find other online communities, to find people in my local area, and you know what? It has completely changed the way that I view heathenry. It has changed the way that I show up in my day-to-day life. Not to mention, a lot of these people will have been doing it for a long time. They can offer you support, they can offer you knowledge, they can offer you insight on the things that you don't know. Heathenry is not a solitary path, it is one that is grounded in the community. So please do go out and find people to be a heathen with. One really good online community that I found is the Ingwine Society, a sort of North Sea heathenism, incorporating Anglo-Saxon material and Frisian material and sort of West Germanic material. It's really good. Lots of lovely people. I would hardly recommend them. And no, they've not endorsed this video. Just sharing my experiences. Build a heathen household. Create a sacred space in your home for prayers, for offerings. Teach your family about heathen customs, stories, virtues. Use Old English or heathen blessings in your daily life. Just integrate it into your day-to-day. However, this is to say that there is no one correct way to practice heathenship. The faith is both ancient and evolving, and it is down to the individual to find a way that works for them. Remember, it's not about recreating the past. It's about making it applicable to the present. I feel like a lot of people in the modern world feel a pull, almost, to pre-Christian religions. I mean, if you just look at the popularity of Asatru in recent years, you'll see that numbers of adherents are massively spiking worldwide. And I think that Anglo-Saxon Heathenship is growing in numbers as well. I think for those people with English or broader Germanic heritage, it does provide that spiritual link to our earliest ancestors, which a lot of, I guess, modern religions don't really resonate with. And unlike mainstream religions, which can a lot of the time feel imposed upon people, I think heathenship allows people to reclaim their spiritual past. And even for those people who don't necessarily have English or Germanic or Anglo-Saxon heritage or DNA or whatever focus stuff you want to pull out, a lot of these a lot of these virtues are universal. They appeal to a wide variety of people. I think if you speak English or another Germanic language, you have as much right to this tradition, to practice it, to be interested in it, as anyone who comes from 100% English lineage, Unlike global religions, Anglo-Saxon heathenship is rooted in the land, it is rooted in nature, in the whites, in the spirits of sacred places. It's not about grand temples, it's about the river down the road, it's about the tree in the woods, it's these sacred grounds that are important to you. Not to anyone else, but to you. I think for a lot of people with modern ecological or environmental concerns, the fact that it is such a land-based religion, that we honour the spirits of the land, that we honour the land whites, it is very appealing to a lot of people. And myself, I work in the environmental sector, and I'm deeply concerned about the way that the planet is heading and the environmental challenges that are going to be upon us in the next 50 or so years. It makes sense for me to follow a earth-based faith. I think the idea of weird reminds us that our personal choices do have consequences, and they do matter. The choices that we make in this life resonate not just through our own lives, but through the lives of our descendants. I feel like in an age where a lot of people feel powerless, Heathenry or heathenship teaches responsibility and to be able to depend on yourself. It teaches resilience. I think it encourages a strong community, something which I've already said I feel is very rare in modern society. Even if the community that you are living in isn't heathen. Is it so bad to have community as one of your virtues, or building community as one of your virtues? We're never going to return to some prophesized golden heathen age. It's not possible. But we can make the best of what we've got, and we can try and improve the world a little bit at a time, surely. I feel like some people seek Anglo-Saxon heathenship because of its warrior ethos. We have figures like Beowulf, Hereward the Wake, the Battle of Maldon, Brythnoth. We've got these fantastic warrior figures from history and from the literature that show us honour, that show us courage against all odds. There's a sense of duty to it. It's a communal, honour-driven society. It's about wisdom as much as it's about strength, I was first drawn to heathenship when I was about 18, I believe. I was an edgy Satanist as a teenager, but I always had a deep interest for more obscure religions. And at that time, I think Asatru was a relatively obscure religion. So I dived into it and I got really interested. Over time, I sort of gravitated more towards an Anglo-Saxon heathenship just because it appealed more to me. It seemed more genuine to me. Not to say that, Asatruism isn't great for a lot of people, but I personally was drawn more towards the faith of my home country. I think one of the challenges of practicing a lesser known faith is that you are going to come up against quite a fair bit of skepticism from people. A lot of people simply won't understand what it is you're talking about. It's not very popular, so I kind of understand where they're coming from, but we can control the way that we react to that. A lot of people will be like, oh, you worship that Marvel guy, Thor. No, and you can either take it upon yourself to explain it to them, or you can just disengage from that conversation. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what people think of you. I say that as a broad sense. Obviously, care about what your family think of you, those who are close to you think of you, but it is a learning and a teaching opportunity. Obviously, there are struggles in reconstructing a faith with relatively limited sources, and you will run up against those struggles, but that is where personal research comes into play. I cannot overstate the value of doing your own research, looking at the source material for yourself, reading the poetry, seeing what about it inspires you and what about it matters to you. I have, of course, had moments of doubt and uncertainty about the path that I'm on. I think it would be strange if you hadn't. I think most people have, regardless of whether they admit it, but then your own personal spiritual experiences come into play. I would advise looking at doing a bit of trance work, meditating, building those relationships with God yourself, and then come back to it. Make it a part of your life. Remember, you are in control of your own mind, so you can make decisions. You can control yourself. It is just a question of doing it. For me, this is more than just a spiritual practice. It is a way of seeing the world, it is a way of honouring the past while moving forward towards the future. We are the keepers of our own weird, but the choices that we make will influence the weird and the weave of everyone who comes after us. And that's what this path teaches me every day. Now, whether you're just starting on this path or whether you've been practicing heathenship for years, remember that heathenry is about action. It is about being honourable. It is about forming a connection. It is about being courageous. The gods don't demand blind faith. They demand that we live well. If you've made it to the end of the video, thank you very much. Very impressive. Are you exploring Anglo-Saxon heathenry? What does this path mean to you? Please do share your thoughts in the comments. I would love to chat with you. And if you found this video helpful, please do like and subscribe. Click the bell icon for more videos on history, heathenry, and spirituality. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.